All right, we are live.
Hello.
Hello, hello. This is exciting. I'm so excited we get to do this together on such an important topic. But welcome everyone who has joined. If you're listening to the recording of this, we are so grateful to have you here with us. Today's session is on manager well-being, beyond self-care to a thriving workplace. I'm Elena Agaragimova, and I'm excited to have Jordana Cole join me today. In this session, we will tackle some of the most pressing issues facing organizations and managers today: the well-being deficit among leaders, its organizational impact, and how we can foster a supportive culture that enhances well-being for both individuals and teams. From my side, for those that are not familiar, I am Elena. I live and breathe personal professional development. I've been in a talent development space for over 14 years. I've done this globally in different organizations, small companies, large companies. I'm also a personal trainer and just a fan of wellness, and have been kind of really discovering different things that wellness means to me over the years, from nutrition to exercise to mindset and so on. And I apply a lot of these things in the work that I do today with managers and leaders and organizations. And my co-host today is Jordana. Over to you.
Thanks, Elena. I'm thrilled to be here with you. And I got to add on about you. Like, you are a consummate learner. So everything wellness you absorb. I love talking to you about all sorts of topics. I know you've got interest and background in neuroscience too. So like Elena, I have a background in learning and development. I've spent more than a decade in learning and development internally within organizations from every sector, including technology to e-commerce to higher education to financial services, size from 400 to 80,000 people, working with global audiences. And my core in that has been about leadership. I am passionate. I live and breathe leadership. Leaders are the crux of so many things in our organization, in our personal lives. And that's been a lot of what I've baked my career in. I'm a coach, I'm a facilitator, I'm a consultant, and I also have a master's degree in applied positive psychology, which is the science of well-being, from the University of Pennsylvania, where I've also taught at both the graduate and undergraduate level. And I bring a lot of the science of well-being into what I do in leadership development, into how I think about how we transform cultures, individuals, teams, etc., to help us all thrive. Because, ultimately that's what it's about, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in preparation for the discussion, there are some new things that you brought to my attention, which I'm really grateful for. And we're going to discuss some of that from a well-being perspective, because as you know, I'm very like physical well-being, a mindset. And then you really changed my mind about what does well-being actually mean. And I know we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
But just to kind of set some context for us for this chat, as organizations strive to navigate this continuous business, changing business environment, the well-being of managers often gets overlooked. And there's, a deficit in manager well-being can have significant ripple effects throughout an organization, affecting productivity, which everybody really cares about, right? In organization, employee morale, and just overall performance. And so it's crucial for us to address these challenges head on and equip our leaders with tools they need to thrive. And I think people who are listening to this are really going to walk away with some tangible and practical things you can implement as a leader, and also help your leaders in your organization do the same. So to kick us off, Jordana, like, what's going on with our managers? What is happening?
Oh, my managers, anybody who's a manager out there, who loves a manager, I love you. I'm here for you. It is becoming increasingly hard to be a leader in today's environment. You think about, obviously there's been so much with the pandemic, but also what we've got going on with economic climate, AI, right? So, managers' jobs are to lead the team in order to do the work and hit the results for the organization. And they're expected to both, drive results, drive performance, get more sustainably, get growth out of people, while also helping them grow in the process, caring for their unique needs, helping them navigate the personal and professional hurdles that they're dealing with. And, so you think about, like, on this day-to-day basis, right? They're driving performance, they're measuring the work that their team gets done. They're, having meetings. They have larger spans of control. A lot of times they've got their own work being player coaches. Their expectations are rising because every year, the year before, what was stretched is now the baseline. So we've got to hit productivity numbers. We've got to hit revenue. We got to keep costs down, but your engagement scores have to be high. Your retentions have to be high. You have to hire the unicorns. You have to care about people. You have to have meaningful conversations. You have to advocate for their growth. You have to tailor to their development. Phew, that's a lot. And a lot of times they don't have, the training, the support to do these things. We're just kind of throwing more and more at them. Not to mention change, right? So you have to be the voice of the change. You have to manage the feedback coming back from your team about the change. You might not have had a choice in the change. You might not have had time to process the change. You might not even have information on how to effectively share the change, and you might not agree with the change. So it's no surprise, and Gallup just had research that came out really hot off the presses in the last couple of weeks from their 2024 workplace report that only 3 out of 10 managers are engaged, and more than half of them are looking to leave. And that was a meta-analysis over 200,000 teams. And they also found that countries with the higher percentage of engaged managers also have a higher percentage of engaged teams. I don't believe in trickle-down economics, but I do believe in trickle-down leadership, because what we model as leaders, how we feel, definitely impacts what our teams do and how they feel as well. And then I think that the kind of crux of this that I want to bring on is managers are employees too. I think sometimes we forget that, right? Because the focus of initiatives and corporate, I'm going to call it corporate caretaking, if there is any. Some organizations do it really well, other organizations in the middle, others not so much. But whether it's thinking about well-being, whether it's thinking about learning and development, growth, connection, belonging, oftentimes that's focused at the front line. And either managers are lumped in, like it's kind of a one size fits all, and managers are just a part of that, or they don't get anything because they're part of the vehicle to deliver that. And managers have different needs. So there's a lot on managers' plates. And I don't know that we really recognize the unique needs that they have, or necessarily doing enough to equip and support them.
And your experience, and just because you've worked with a lot of different organizations and you do a lot of research, which I give you so many kudos for. But is it pretty much the same across board, like small organizations, larger ones? Like, do we have any trends around where this is mostly happening?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I can't answer that factually, just based on kind of my own experiences. And it's interesting because I think there's kind of this like special snowflake syndrome, like, oh, I'm super unique, we're X, Y, and Z, or I lead in this role or this team. And what I have found is that a lot of the challenges that leaders face tend to be similarly themed across roles, across organizations, across industries, across sizes, and even across levels with some differentiation. But yeah, they are similar challenges. Certainly there's unique things, right? In a larger organization, you likely have a bit more support than in a startup environment where you're having to wear many hats. But at the same time, you have larger spans of control. You might be dealing with things like layoffs that smaller organizations aren't dealing with necessarily as much, but have their own challenges. So it is, I think there are similar trends with kind of some uniqueness in there. And that's, again, based on personal experience. I'm curious from your own perspective, kind of the work that you are doing. You have conversations, you go to a bunch of industry events and conferences. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think, again, can't give a factual answers, but what I've kind of been seeing is it really comes down to culture of the organization, culture of the team, I think, no matter what, because I've seen smaller organizations that are just managers are overwhelmed and they don't have, like, although they might be all sharing an office and or one space, let's say, and there's a lot more connectivity, there's still a big disconnect at the same time on these things. Larger organizations also, you can just kind of get lost in the weeds. And it really just depends on who's above you, like who's your manager, like the manager's managers, and I think there's a difference between being a manager of a manager of managers and a manager of
Yes.
individual contributors. So like leader of leaders or leader of individual contributors. And I think that's a different ball game as well. So it's like there's like different layers of leadership and management organization. I think each time one changes, there's always challenges and kind of obstacles, because nobody really teaches one how to handle. And I think that it's like a mindset shift, right?
I'm really glad that you mentioned that because you're spot on. I have a soft spot in my heart for middle managers because I do think more and more organizations are recognizing the importance of investing in leaders and wind up creating training and education for frontline leaders. I do a lot of that. Or on the flip side, right? It's executives. We're succession planning. We're looking to kind of launch that VP level to the future C-suite. We need to shift their strategic mindset. And that middle manager bucket is often forgotten. And they do have unique needs. I actually wrote a 2-part article on this back in September for Training Industry Magazine. There is a QR code to my profile. People can find that on my website. And you and I even did a podcast episode where we talked all about that. So I know that's not the topic of this conversation, but there's definitely some unique needs for that audience to consider. And I'd encourage anybody who's interested to explore that.
And before we go into like what does well-being actually mean and strategies to tackle that, just where do you think this is streaming from? Like, has it always been an issue? Because I feel like it's, in my opinion, at least in terms of like what I've observed in the workplace, it seems to be a newer phenomena. When like the extent to which we're burnt out and managers are kind of really in this tough spot, or is it just my assumptions?
I think that's a great question. And it's hard to know, is this just based on how we feel or is this real? And
Mm-hmm.
I think there is some research coming on right now. I actually read something the other day. I haven't fully digested it yet about the increased velocity of change that we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. And I mean, if you just look over the past 4 years as a society, we can say we've been through a lot, and a lot in a 4-year period than we've been through in a 20-year period before that, right? We've gone through some global crises. You've got COVID, you've got global wars, you've got
Economic
economic
things going on.
crisis,
Yeah.
right? Climate change. You've got all kinds of stuff happening. And I think one of the things that's shifting now that maybe was different before was it was a little easier beforehand to think that our work and personal self were separated, right? Like leave your personal stuff at home, bring your professional self to work. And that's always been a myth. We are not two people. We are one person, one whole person. But the pandemic blew that open because, for many roles, they were home. There was more of a glimpse into your personal life with families, with pets. People started sharing more vulnerably and openly about their needs, about their health, about their mental health. And I think that stayed around. And I also think there's been a shift in the millennial generation and Gen Z about wanting to be able to bring your whole self to work, but also wanting to be a part of things that you feel driven by creating meaningful work, by feeling like you're mattering at work, which is part of the well-being crux that we'll get into. And so, our needs are shifting a little bit, but also I think the environment is just, maybe bringing things to the surface that were always there, but we kind of did a better job of veiling them over because we weren't forced to confront them. And then obviously the pace of technology and the change in the world, we're 24/7 on, right? Everybody's connected to work via their phones in a way that even 10 years ago, you could kind of shut that off or the expectation wasn't there. I even feel for like teachers where, all hours of the day and night, not only the education, but engaging with parents, engaging with administrators, et cetera. So I think that kind of on demand, and then just the fear of AI and leveraging AI more in roles, offshoring automation. There's a lot more that's happening now that wasn't happening before. And as companies are laying off amidst a time where there are record profits or streamlining organizations, it is, how do we get more done with fewer people, right?
Mm,
And we still need to hit these same goals, and certainly we have tools that are helping us be more effective. But ultimately, it's okay. How do we right size? How do we change our approach, and still drive outcomes and engagement out of people in a difficult environment?
mm. Absolutely. I think there is a big shift as you mentioned, like the generational pieces and the diversity of personalities, the diversity of how we work, expectations about what does, balance mean to you at work and so on. So I think there's a lot of different expectations from different audiences in a workplace that is also kind of we're just in a very unique. I think we have like what 4 generations in a workplace right now, and alphas are like on their way
Yep.
in. So and they're gonna completely flip the game probably, so anyway, we'll see how it goes, but let's move forward. Earlier I mentioned that you really shifted my mindset around what does well-being actually mean, because being a personal trainer, I'm biased. I'm like, well-being is health, and it's what you eat, and it's how well you sleep, and it's it's your mindset and so on. But then you've kind of really opened up another layer for me, so talk to me about that.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's all those things, right? And I'd love to hear from you after I share a bit about things that about the connection between mind and body, because those are real and important. And I think enough people don't know about that. We know the things that we should do, but we don't really know why. So yeah, physical and mental wellness, physical and mental health are key parts of well-being, but they're not the whole. So, when we think about well-being, it's ultimately, what does it mean to live a fulfilling life? What does it mean to feel, to do well? And there are aspects of that are individual, like physical and mental health, but there are aspects of that, we're social creatures, right? That move kind
Hmm.
of beyond ourselves. So there's social well-being, there's community well-being, there's career well-being. We want to feel like we're contributing to something greater than ourselves and feeling a sense of accomplishment and purpose. There's also financial well-being, right? If I can't care for my basic needs, my family's basic needs, how am I ever going to get to a place where I can thrive? Now, we all have some core needs as human beings. We all have needs for security and safety, both physically, psychologically, financially. We also have needs for growth. We need to feel like we're growing. We need to feel sense of purpose. We need to feel self-esteem. We need to feel connection. And the other thing is, well-being is a personal thing, but it's not a personal problem.
Hmm.
Within those core needs, we all have unique needs, and our systems and environments can either promote our well-being or can harm our well-being. So, well-being is not just on the individual, it's also about the climate that we're within. So I'll talk a bit about that a little bit more in a second, but I'd love to hear from you, like the linkages that about mind body wellness, and just kind of what shifted for you around thinking about well-being.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, and this is coming from somebody who is, by the way, used to be like a workaholic and is like, like I just need to focus on my career type thing. And over the years, just really trying to optimize my own wellness and then go into personal training space, and working with clients who are in the corporate space and seeing a difference between people who have regular exercise, regular sleep in their lifestyle versus those who don't, and just discussing the performance metrics with them. There's a lot of huge indicators, and so the mind and body are completely linked, which is why mental health conditions in a lot of cases can also manifest physically, and we see this quite often, right? Because I mean, I'm not even going to go into the impact of mental health on your energy and creativity and all those things. We know, we can see, just think of the last time you felt a little bit down and so on. You don't really have motivation to do much, so those things can definitely impact your physical well-being as well. But on the flip side, the mind-body connection can also be utilized to improve the well-being. And one body technique that you actually introduced me to recently for improving well-being is the vagus nerve, and that's the longest kind of cranial nerve that you have. It connects the brain to the heart and other internal organs, including the gut, and it basically regulates the rest and digest parasympathetic system responses. So if you look at yourself, like it's like if you're a tree with like a bunch of if you're a tree with a bunch of what's it, tentacles or whatever you want to call it, like leaves and kind of veins going down you, like that's the nerve that sends all of those things. And if not regulated, it can have a huge impact on your overall wellness and your emotional response and how well you process information and so on. So this is where exercise, among other things, are super, super useful. So if you're not going to exercise for the sake of being, being healthy or sleeping better and so on, at least exercise for the vagus nerve, which is connected to the emotional response that you have, to the critical thinking ability, and just the way your whole body functions. So and you can do, I mean, there's different types. People always say like, oh, exercise, you have to be a CrossFit athlete or you have to be a runner. You don't have to do that. You can just do regular interval training. Endurance trainings are really great for activating the vagus nerve. In addition to that, it also just promotes, like exercise in general promotes general mental well-being by releasing feel-good chemicals in your brain, like endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine, which can increase your mood. It's going to put you in a better mood. It's going to decrease stress. And if you think about it, Jordana, a lot of the medication that is around that helps people with stress, with better sleep, with emotional things, depression, and so on, have these chemicals in it. So you can actually naturally produce it. And it's not a popular opinion because it's free and it doesn't make healthcare money, but it is actually something you can stimulate on your own before deciding to go to a doctor. If you're, again, clinical depression is a whole different thing, but if you're just wanting to improve your overall mental health, I think it's important. A couple of other things that really help here is cold exposure. So if you're brave enough to try cold exposure, that activates the vagus nerve. It slows down your heart rate and helps you calm down. And what also it allows to do is tackle anxiety, which is a big thing for a lot of people right now. So it allows your brain to just slow down. And if you've ever, next time you're in a shower, just go take a cold shower and just see how you feel. You're not going to think about anything else except just your breathing. And by focusing on the breathing, you calm down. And then that emotional response is going to stay much calmer throughout the day. And so, and the final piece here as well is the breathing exercise, and particularly kind of deep breathing. When you are having a panic attack, people say, just breathe. And they give you the bag. I always think of like the bag. That's because it calms you down. It calms you down. So breath actually calms you down. And so all of these things add not only to your physical well-being, but also to your mental well-being. But I can spend a whole other hour on this. So I'm going to pause here.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that, because, it is so true, right? Like, there's a lot of chemistry in our bodies, and the chemicals impact our emotions, they impact our thoughts, right? Impact how we show up, our energy levels, our how fatigued we are, how alert we are. And there are ways that we can make choices that can impact the chemistry level and the chemicals in our bodies. And it's funny, candidly, I'm somebody who does not love to exercise, right? And I've had to shift my mindset around it, that it's not about, an hour, it just moving, right? Like, I love to dance. So just dancing for 5 minutes, going for a walk and taking a walk and talk meeting instead of sitting at my computer. And especially for me, nature and trees are a huge thing for me. So being outside in that, I notice a couple things with that. And I feel more energized. I feel more peaceful. My breathing is slowed down. And what's interesting is a lot of those times, actually, that's when my key ideas come into my brain, because there is actually research that our brain continues operating on tough problems and can actually be more creative and come up with those breakthrough moments when it's not focused on the kind of center of our attention and is instead in the background. It's why I actually have a notebook in my shower, because I have the shower thoughts that come up, and I'll jot things down because I'm not actively thinking about the problem. So taking those moments of movement, of cold, of water, of nature can help with that. And I often think about exercise as work, but I take vitamins every day. So instead of I think about exercise like vitamins, then it's vitamins for my brain, it's vitamins for my body, it's vitamins that are chemical, right? It's just, instead of popping something in my mouth, it's going and moving. I think the other thing that I want to call out about well-being is healthy does not necessarily mean thriving. So, I think people mistake that the goal, and this is kind of one of the core tenets of positive psychology. And I think people have a mythos that positive psychology means like be happy all the time. That's not what it's about. Where it got the name from positive is imagine like your life is a scale from -10 to +10 with 0 in the middle. And a lot of what traditional psychology does is focus on overcoming the deficit. So, where are we below 0? That's where we have mental illness. That's also the medical model, right? Where are we below 0? Where are our deficits? Either, our blood pressure's too high, or, we need to lose weight, or we're dealing with different illnesses, right? And the goal in a lot of these ways is to get us back to 0. Get us to functioning, getting us to healthy. 0 shouldn't be the goal. 0 is the starting point. So what positive psychology, what the science of well-being is all about is how do we take people up the chain from that baseline of 0 of health to not only healthy, to not only functioning, but actually to thriving. And there's a lot of things that go into that. We thrive when we have strong relationships in our lives. And in fact, Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, has put out a public health announcement that loneliness is our largest epidemic right now. And you go back to the workplace, and I think a lot of organizations have, their reasons for return to office are well intended, and they might not be sharing this as a reason why, like that Zoom doesn't give us that same interpersonal connection. And I'll tell you what, leaders are kind of the loneliest group, because unless we've done intentional things to create community for them, oftentimes they can feel like they're on an island, especially, large organizations, you might have a peer who does the same job that you do. In smaller organizations, you might be the only one who's leading a team like this. You might not have somebody you can connect with who you feel like is sharing in the same situations as you, or an open space where you can share vulnerably about how you're feeling without fear of judgment or repercussions on your career if you share up or across or down. So, there is that sense of loneliness and lack of community within leaders. And that's a big, part of well-being. A big part of well-being is feeling like we're growing. And in a lot of organizations, we focus that on that career ladder. And as you get higher up at the manager level, there's less of that growth. And that's not what growth is. Growth is about learning new things. Growth is about being productively challenged. Growth is about new experiences. Growth is about connection, right? But we don't necessarily incentivize or think about it like that. And because we've built kind of this hustle culture, we tend to think about growth as doing more, achieving more. And then we feel a little empty, because there is this tendency where we go, I'll be happy when I get to X, or I'll feel good when we get to X. And then the goalposts move, because we get there and it's like, well, why don't I feel like I felt great in that moment, but I don't feel any better. So I'm just going to push it to this and push it to this and push it to this. Well-being isn't about moving further and further along and setting bigger and bigger goals. Well-being isn't about goal. Well-being is about whole. How do I create a whole life? How do I feel whole as a person? How do I feel whole, my sense of self, in the relationships that matter to me and what I'm contributing to in my community? And that's not something we think or talk about a lot. And, one person that I'm going to shout out, who I work closely with him. I love his research. His book years ago helped me help shift the idea of well-being and needs with the teams I was supporting during COVID. And that's Scott Barry Kaufman, and his book Transcend, which is all about thinking about what human needs look like and taking Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs and dispelling the myth that it's actually a hierarchy. And it really is about whole being and what that means and what that feels like. And when I think about whole being at the individual level, what does that mean at the organizational level? So I mentioned Vivek Murthy a little bit ago, and they actually, the health department actually put out a framework for well-being at work. You can find this online. We'll share it in a link. And there's a couple of measures that you can use in an organization to determine well-being at work. An individual's protection from harm, an individual's community, an individual's harmony with life, an individual's sense of mattering. And what mattering means is that we contribute to something greater than ourselves, and we feel recognized for the sense of contribution. That's work by Isaac Pilatensky. You can also reframe it as, am I adding value and do I feel valued? That's what mattering is about. And the growth opportunities. So when you kind of look at that, a lot of times when we do corporate well-being initiatives, we focus on the individual, right? It's the wellness counter. How many steps have you hit? Are you drinking enough water? Right? Are you getting your exercise? But it's you. What are you doing? And I did a little experiment earlier before we got on the call, and I just kind of Googled managing employee burnouts, supporting employee burnout, managing leader burnout, supporting leader burnout. And it was fascinating because the employee burnout stuff was all about like, okay, as a leader, here's what you can do to help your employees, right? And then it was leader burnout. It's here are all the things you should be doing. There was nothing about here are the things that we should be supporting leaders. Very, very few things. And when I look at that list of things, protection of harm, community, harmony with life, mattering, growth, these aren't things that an individual does. These are things that an organization provides. And, my question would be, how often are organizations measure employee engagement? Are they actually measuring this? Are they measuring their climate, the health of their climate to promote well-being in these ways? And I think about, what leaders are going through right now. You've got emotional harm from layoffs and organizational changes, policies, processes, right? You're managing that emotional harm yourself, but you're also then the vehicle of the emotional harm coming back at you from the employees you manage. You can have emotional harm from navigating changes, for having to kind of performance manage while, caring for the fact that an individual is dealing with some serious stuff at home, but we still need them to hit results. There's a lack of community because you're often alone. There's not often spaces where leaders come together and share, it's here's what we expect of you, here's the business goals, but not here's how you can come together and share the challenges that you're facing and share what you need in an open environment and feel, connected, even if it's a leader who does something different than you, because you have a connection point on being a leader. They often don't hear how they matter. We do often employee rewards. That's at the frontline level, but we don't necessarily do things specific for leaders. We reward leaders based on their team performance, not on what they're doing as leaders. And it's very rare. I've been fortunate in my career to hear from my team over the years of how I've mattered to them as a leader, but it's very rare for leaders to hear that. And if you're listening to this and you have a leader who has made a difference for you, take 5 minutes and let them know how they mattered, because we don't know unless you tell us. And then the growth is less clear, as we've already talked about. And life harmony, please. Who feels harmonious between work and life right now? So yeah, what do you think about that? How do those kind of buckets resonate with the things you think about?
Yeah, there's so many gems that you said, like, I almost like whoever, like we had a few people jump on just now. Like, I just want them to go back and listen to you from the beginning, because it's just, there's so many gems. One of the things that really kind of stand out that you mentioned is around, there's so many, but let me just start with one, around, do you feel like you matter? Like, do you matter in the workplace, right? And what I love that I was just really, really impressed with is one of our rising managers, like kind of like young managers at Horizon recently. He actually shared what he does with his team, and just give you a live example. So his team tends to be like super engaged. They're the ones that we have this thing where we do high fives every bi-weekly, and they do high fives, and they're super engaged in general. And they're very, the productivity wise, they are connected, they are a team. Like, we have many teams, but they really stand out. So I said, listen, I asked this guy, I was like, what are you doing? And one of the things that I was really impressed in, a couple of things. So one, obviously he has his check-ins and kind of check-ins with the team one-on-one, and then as a group. So during one-on-one conversations, one of the questions he asks, so he has two categories. One is like around the work, like what you're doing project-wise, how well you're doing technical stuff. And then there's the, how do you feel? Do you feel like you matter? Like, and I forget the actual questions, but it's essentially around that. And I thought that's so powerful, right? Just to ask his team that. And then the other thing, what I also really like about the social connection is that every 2 weeks, the whole team has to meet another person on the team for 15 minutes. And the only rule they have is you do not talk about work. And that includes him too as a manager. So it also allows him, and he's a vulnerable manager in a sense that he shows his vulnerability and he really shares with the team about what he might be going through. So I see not only he as a manager is very much in tune with his team, but also his team members are very connected. And I think the whole thing just works really well. And that's very unique to see. I don't see that quite often. So that was really, really interesting.
Can I just hit on that
please.
really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that you shared those real life examples because I think we need to hear them. And I think that you kind of just hit the nail on the head of what the challenge is. He's doing that for his team, but who's doing that for him?
Mm-hmm.
You're recognizing him as an L&D leader. Is his manager recognizing him for doing this? Is the company recognizing him for doing this? Is anybody asking him how he's feeling? And so these are like this, I think a lot of times we think about, they have to be huge initiatives. Like, oh gosh, you know what, our managers are working really hard, so let's give them an extra bonus. And money is nice. And a lot of people are driven by that. And it only gets you so far. It is the small things that you do in a day-to-day, taking 10 minutes to have a conversation with your managers to go, what beyond money makes you feel valued? How are you feeling this week? What would make next week 5% better for you? What's the biggest frustration or drains on your day-to-day? What's energizing? What's the best recognition or praise someone can give you? Even just taking one of those questions and doing a listening tour for the week as an HR team, as an executive team, as a leader of leaders to your leaders is meaningful. Celebrating and recognizing the leader, like the one that you described, who are doing the things that make that impact, and showcasing them as incredible managers in the organization. That's the stuff that we're missing. And, you know, how do we kind of give that sort of thing to our managers? You know, how do we say to them, how are you feeling? What do you need? Like, so I think about change a lot. And that I think is a big miss, right? We go, okay, here's the change coming through. You have to be the messenger to the team. Here's what we're doing and here's how to do it. And it's like, there's no time to even process it. And I think sometimes senior leaders forget there was a moment when you heard about the change, right? Where you had a slew of emotions and you probably worked through it over time. And now you're at a point where you're sharing it with the team and you're closer to the acceptance stage, even whether or not you agree or disagree with it, you know, this is going to happen and you accept it because you've had a little bit of breathing room to process the emotions. We rarely give leaders any space for that breathing room to process emotions, to ask, how are you feeling about this? And even if we do, oftentimes it's, okay, well, let me sell you on the reasons why you shouldn't feel that way and why this is a good idea. And okay, moving on, great, you shared that, but we need you to do X, Y, and Z in that same conversation. Or, you know, they're afraid to truly share how they feel because it's going to be held against them. They might be judged for it. They might be looked as a naysayer. It might impact their growth or promotion. So really creating a space where you pause and go, how are you feeling? Honestly, like no judgment, safe space. What do you need if you're not feeling great to get to a place where you can at least accept?
Yeah.
What do you need to be able to handle the emotions that are coming in from your team? And it's not just a one and done. Like the message being delivered is the starting point. It's not the end point. So creating that space where leaders can come back and share, what are you hearing from your team? How are you feeling based on what you're hearing? What do you need in order to support that? Like that is something that any leader organization can implement tomorrow. And just that action makes them feel valued, right? Because you're asking them for their input, you're listening to how they're feeling, you care about them as a person, and you are recognizing how instrumental it is for them to be able to message the change appropriately for the organization to succeed.
Hmm. I like that. That's really powerful and so simple. And I think that companies spend, billions of dollars on all these things around talent development and management training, but none of it is effective as literally just asking the questions of that. Like everything else comes secondary. I feel like everything else is like band-aids on broken legs, but I think it's just these small things, right? Like these everyday high impact things that one can do to actually transform your manager so that they're in the space for a leadership training if you do want to do one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious also, and for people who are joined, feel free to drop us questions and comments in the chat. We're definitely looking forward to your engagement. But I'm curious, if you're, let's say, if you're an L&D person listening to this, or if you're a leader of a leader, that's wonderful. But what if you're a leader who doesn't have that support? Like, is there a way to ask for it? What if, like, you know what I mean? Because I know organizations that there's just nobody to really ask, and like, what do you do? Do you then say like, okay, I just need to change my environment? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it depends on the situation that a leader's in. Um, I think a lot of times we have this like, I call it the Goldilocks effect, where it's like, too cold, too hot, just right. Like the people above us aren't giving us what we need. The people below us don't get it. We're just right. We're just perfect, right? And our leaders are humans too. And we're all flawed. And none of us are mind readers. And it's amazing to me how many leaders don't actually ask for what they need, because
Mm-hmm.
they're like, well, they're not giving it to me, so they just must not want to. And there's so much assumption baked into that, because people don't really know what we need unless we share it. And I mean, I think we can do a better job about asking, but if there is something you need, like if you are somebody who needs more regular or more specific positive feedback, if you need to understand how your work connects to the bigger picture, if you want to, connect with somebody on another team who's going through something similar, just ask, and sharing the reasons why, this is going to help me be more effective in my job. This is going to help me feel more energized. This is going to help me, feel a sense of connection and innovate better. And if your leader or the org isn't responsive to that, I think that's when you have to ask a question about what you need for yourself to feel like you can do your best work and you can be your whole self in a productive way in that environment. But I think that's the last stage. Like, what have I done to ask to really articulate for what I need? And then I think there's a couple things that I would encourage, managers to think about for themselves. One is that idea of like, what are the booster shots? So, you know, I talked about questions that leaders and HR teams should be asking of their managers, but there's also questions that you can ask yourself, like just taking 5 minutes to pulse check at the end of the day. What energized me today?
Hmm.
What drained me today? Who energized me today? Who drained me today? How did I contribute to someone or something today, no matter how small it is, right? How did I grow today? What did I learn today? Just taking those moments is like that booster shot. And heck, put that mind body to work. Do it while taking a walk, right?
Mhm.
Do it while sitting outside with nature, right? Instead of just kind of being in front of your computer, but taking literally 5 minutes. Um, and then you can change your habits based on that, right? If you're noticing that a certain person is draining you, maybe be intentional about how often you spend time with that person or when you engage them, so you don't end your day with that person. And part of that is also checking your gauge earlier. Like I think about us like, like if we've got full power battery or like a fuel gauge, we often wait until the empty light is on before we start wanting to make changes. And I think there's small things that we can be doing even when we're like 3/4 or halfway full, to keep ourselves, kind of in that full fuel gauge. So, really, okay, I'm starting to be a little drained, I'm going to engage with this person who energizes me. Or I'm going to take that 5-minute walk, or I'm going to reflect in this moment, or I'm going to listen to that song that makes me feel better and like literally just stand up and dance in my office, because those are the things that help me. So I think there are things that we can do. I think there are things that we can ask for. And then I think that there are things that we can provide as well. And then one other thing I wanted to share, because I know there's a concept called empathic distress or empathic burnout. This comes up a lot in healthcare professions where and also for people who are caretakers. And look, there are a lot of managers who are caretaking at work for their team and are also caretaking at home in their personal lives, and then their selves kind of get lost in the process. And empathic distress, like we're taking on the emotions that the other person is throwing at us. We're taking on their stressors in addition to the own stress that we're feeling. And that can create anxiety, feelings of overwhelm, feelings of depletion. And our role is to be there and create a safe space for our team. Our role is also to create accountability for performance and results. And that doesn't mean that you have to allow that empathy to take you over. So I have a metaphor that I've used that has helped people in conversations, and particularly leaders. When you are in those conversations where somebody is stressed, they're upset, they're overwhelmed, how do you show up? So my metaphor is, are you a colander or are you a bowl? So when we are a bowl, that person is pouring into us, right? And that bowl becomes heavier, heavier, heavier. We're weighed down and it eventually spills over. And let's be honest, our bowls are not empty because we've got our own stuff that's in there. And when you're spilling over, can you be there for that other person? Can you be your best self? No, because you're worried about dropping that bowl. You're feeling heavy. Your arms are getting sore. Instead, be a colander. So you think about a colander or a strainer, whatever you call it. You can pour 8 gallons of water in that thing, and the water spills out, and all that's remaining is, the pasta or whatever else it is that you're cooking, and it's light. So when you're a colander in conversations as a manager, it's about not taking on the emotions, recognizing the emotion that somebody's feeling, saying, it sounds like you're frustrated right now. Is that correct? Okay. Yes. If I'm hearing you correctly, like these are the things that you're frustrated by. Focus on, that's the substance. That's the pasta, right? The things. And just creating a space where the person feels heard and valued is all you need to do. And it's going to help you still feel strong, compassionate, and whole in that process, because you're not taking on the emotions. You've let those emotions go down the drain. So the next time you're in a conversation where you're feeling overwhelmed, like take that moment and check in with yourself. Am I being a bowl in this moment, or am I being a colander? And if I'm being a colander, how do I let those emotions just drain down so that I can focus on naming how the person is feeling and really tackling the things that are bothering them in this moment?
I love that. Something I do for myself that's a little bit different, but same concept is I just imagine I have this bubble around me, and that like I don't take on other people's. I can observe it, and I can, like, it's like a clear bubble. I can observe it. I'm there for them, but it's not entering into my space, basically. Like whatever it is, because in talent development, it's like everybody comes to you with different things, and you take on a lot of things as well. I love all these actionable tips that you've given, and as we kind of wrap up this conversation, and waiting for any comments or questions that might come in. One thing I also would like to add is, for as a manager, as a leader, some people are just in situations where maybe you don't have that support in a workplace, and I think some of the strategies that you've suggested are brilliant. But also, I think having joy outside of work, whether it's hobbies, whether it's whatever it is, right? Like spending time with loved ones, I think that joy is so important, and the ability to create that boundary and make sure that you have that consistent joy outside of work. Because if you come home and then there's no joy at home, or there's no hobbies that make you happy, and you just kind of in this routine of just coming home and maybe working a little bit more, and then you go to sleep, and it's the same routine of just work, and no time for you and your soul, if you want to call it that, as fluff as it may sound. You got to feed something that feeds your soul. I think that's super, super important, because then everything else becomes, it's easier to deal with other things.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because candidly, I struggled with that for a long time in my professional life, because I'm so passionate about what I do and it's so purposeful for me. Work became my identity. And I was in a
Mm,
situation where a job I had built went away. And I went through a mental health crisis, honestly, because I lost sense of my identity and my purpose. And it took a lot of time to come out of that. And I'm stronger having had that experience. And I've now been able to make sure that I'm not spending all of my energy at work, that I'm channeling my energy into other things that bring me joy and finding other hobbies. And I play an instrument, I play the ukulele. I'm actually part of a band with it. And what I actually found is the more I got involved with the band, the better I showed up at work and the better I performed, even though, I wasn't spending as much time. Like, time does not equate to quality, right? And that's because I was recharging my creative self in another way. I was moving through the band. I was playing music, which is, so core to our well-being. I was in a state of immersion, also known as flow, and it made me more energized. And that creative outlet helped me set boundaries that enabled me to be more effective, creative, engaged, productive, whatever you want to call it, back at work. So, finding those things, and even like now, the thing about my instrument is I've got it by my desk. I could pick it up for 5 minutes and play 5 minutes of
mm.
joy. So that's the thing. Like, that's a takeaway that I want, whether you're looking for yourself as a manager, where you're looking for an organization in HR and L&D, as executive team, it's what is the low hanging fruit? What is the low effort, high value stuff that's going to make an impact? What's something that you can do in 5 minutes that will bring you joy, that will help you feel a sense of connection, that will enable you to reflect on how you've learned, that can help you move, that can help you feel healthy, whatever it might be. So what are some any 5 minute tips you've got, Elena?
Yeah, I think just bring an awareness as well. That's the biggest thing. I mean, I feel like self-awareness in everything is it's just the base of everything in life, career, personal development, fitness, health, etc. So I think, from an emotional mindset perspective, paying attention to how your body feels, how your emotions that you have, when you, to your point, what drains you, what gives you energy, recognizing those moments, understanding if you're walking into a situation or a meeting, you're feeling some type of way, understand where is that coming from, because it's not coming from the surface. There's something deeper there. So I think bringing awareness is step one. Like, you have to know what it is. You have to identify the problem before you actually go into solutions. So I think awareness is a big piece. I think just movement in general, and you did mention, going for a walk, and all of those things are true. And what else is also true is that after the age of 35, your muscle mass, your bone density goes down significantly every year after that. And so maintaining muscle and doing some level of resistance training or weight training is essential for how we age. And to your point about financial well-being, the if you think about investing in your fitness now and your health now will save you money in the future, which then prevent you from having stress levels when you're going into retirement, because you're spending all that money on healthcare costs that are completely preventable. And for people who are listening to this that are in their kind of 30s or early 40s, this is when it's the time to be preventive, right? Because that's when we don't feel it, and things manifest inside of us that we don't feel, and then all that little crap starts coming out after the age of 40, 45, 50s, and we're like, where is this coming from? It's coming from years and years of neglect of things that are happening internally. And I think, again, mindset has a huge piece to it. So 5-minute walks, before a meeting, standing up from your desk, even opening up your chest. Like, if you just open up your chest, Jordana, like, it just feels so good because it opens up your chest, and we're in this state like this in front of our computers. And what this is signaling to our bodies is like, protect us, something is wrong. So you're literally in this state. And I think just relaxing your shoulders and opening that up from time to time has huge benefits. And everybody who's listening to this, if you just do that now for a few seconds, you already feel better. And if you just take a deep breath with it on top of that, I mean, small things, completely free. Everybody has time for them, and invest in a standing desk. That's been a game changer for me. When we went to a fully remote, it matters. Every hour that you sit, it kills, I forget the actual numbers, but it takes X number of minutes off your life. These are real backed up science facts that stationary lifestyle is not how we're meant to be. So I think all of these things from just a wellness perspective are powerful.
Yeah. And yeah, it matters. And I think your health matters, it matters, you matter, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the crux of it. I'm about helping leaders understand that they matter. Anybody who's here, thank you for joining. You know, you had choices of where to be today. You matter, and you have an impact. And whether you lead a team or you're looking to support those who do, you report into a leader who you really appreciate. Take a moment, think about who matters to you today. Reach out to them, let them know why. Get specific. And what's cool about that is that's going to make them feel good, and that's going to make you feel good too.
Absolutely. Jordana, I learn with you and from you every time I talk to you. Thank you. I'm sure the audience have learned a lot. For those who missed it, we are recording. I'm going to put this up on YouTube and share the recording as well. So stay tuned for next lives. I'm sure we'll do many of those. Thank you, Jordana, and thank you for everybody who's here with us.
Thank you, Elena. I learn from you all the time too. You matter, my friend.
You matter too. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.